Before we unravel the secrets buried in the dust of the past, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel. History is a puzzle, and we need your help to piece it together. Thank you. The wind cutting through the Udelnaya flea market in St. Petersburg was not just cold, it was old. It carried the scent of damp wool, oxidizing metal, and the peculiar sweet rot of things that had been stored in basements for half a century. It was October 1999. The Soviet Union had been gone for nearly a decade, dissolved into memory and geography. But here, among the endless rows of folding tables and blankets spread on the muddy ground, the empire was still very much alive. It was being sold off, piece by piece, for handfuls of devalued rubles. Alexei Volkov pulled his collar up against the chill. He was 42 years old, a man with a face etched by the weary cynicism common to his generation. The generation that had been promised a communist utopia in their childhood and given a chaotic capitalist free-for-all in their adulthood. He wasn't here for history. He was here for a carburetor for a 1986 Lada that refused to die, a stubborn beast of a car that was the only inheritance he had received from his father. He moved through the crowd, navigating the narrow aisles formed by the sellers. On one side, a babushka sold Soviet military medals and porcelain tea sets. On the other, a man with missing teeth displayed a collection of rusted surgical tools and bootleg cassette tapes. It was a graveyard of domestic life. You could buy a stranger's family photo album for the price of a loaf of bread. You could buy a darker past too if you knew where to look. Uniforms, badges, the heavy bureaucratic stamps that had once decided the fate of millions. Alexei found the car part section, haggled half-heartedly with a mechanic whose hands were permanently stained with grease, and secured the carburetor. He should have turned back toward the metro station then. The sky was turning the color of a bruised plum, threatening snow, and his wife, Irina, was expecting him for early dinner. But something pulled him down a different aisle, a quiet row near the edge of the forest that bordered the market. The seller was an old man, wrapped in a heavy military greatcoat that looked 3 sizes too big. He didn't shout his wares like the others. He sat on a crate smoking a cigarette that smelled of acrid tobacco, watching the shoes of the passers-by. Spread before him on a blue tarp was the usual assortment of junk. Broken clocks, stacks of Pravda from the 1970s, tarnished samovars, and the suitcase. It was sitting at the corner of the tarp, brown leather, scuffed and worn at the edges. It wasn't particularly unique. It was the standard Soviet-issue travel case, the kind millions of citizens had carried on trains to the Black Sea for their state-approved vacations. But as Alexei's eyes swept over it, his breath hitched in his throat. It wasn't the suitcase itself. It was the handle. Wrapped tightly around the leather grip was a distinct braiding of blue and white nylon cord. It was a sailor's knot, intricate and tight. Alexei stopped. The noise of the market, the haggling, the barking dogs, the distant train whistle, seemed to drop away, replaced by a high-pitched ringing in his ears. He took a step closer, his heart hammering a sudden, violent rhythm against his ribs. He remembered that knot. He remembered the hands that had tied it. "How much?" Alexei asked. His voice sounded foreign to his own ears, scratchy and thin. The old man looked up, his eyes milky with cataracts. He took a long drag of his cigarette and exhaled a cloud of gray smoke. "For the case? 50 rubles. Good leather. Soviet quality. Not like the garbage they make now." Alexei crouched down. He reached out, his fingers trembling slightly as he brushed the nylon cord. It was rough to the touch, stained with years of grime, but the pattern was unmistakable. Double loop, twist, tuck. "Where did you get this?" Alexei asked, not looking at the man. "Estate clearance," the seller grunted, flicking ash onto the mud. "Apartment over on Vasilevsky Island. Old woman passed away, no family. Landlord wanted the place cleared out. I took what I could carry." Vasilevsky Island. That was wrong. That didn't make sense. "I'll take it," Alexei said. He fumbled in his pocket, pulling out a crumpled 100-ruble note. "Keep the change." The old man's eyes widened slightly at the overpayment, but he snatched the bill before Alexei could change his mind. "Suit yourself." Alexei grabbed the handle. The weight of it was familiar, a ghost of a memory pressing into his palm. He lifted it, expecting it to be empty, but there was a heft to it. Something shifted inside with a dull thud. He walked away quickly, not waiting for a receipt or a bag. He moved through the crowd with a new urgency, clutching the suitcase against his leg, as if it were filled with gold bars. He didn't look at the carburetor he had come for. He left it sitting on a bench near the exit, forgotten. He needed to get home. He needed to be alone, because he knew, with a terrifying certainty that defied all logic, that he was holding the last thing his brother, Nikolai, had ever touched before he vanished off the face of the earth 15 years ago. Alexei's apartment was in a Khrushchevka block in the Northern District, a 5-story concrete box that had been built in the 1960s to house the workers of a factory that no longer existed. It was quiet when he arrived. Irina was still at her shift at the bakery. He placed the suitcase on the kitchen table. Under the harsh light of the single overhead bulb, the leather looked even more battered. There were scratches deep enough to expose the raw material beneath the dye, and a dark stain near the latch that looked like spilled coffee, or something else. Alexei sat in the wooden chair, staring at it. For 15 years, the disappearance of Nikolai Volkov had been an open wound in the family history. Nikolai was the golden child. 3 years older than Alexei, he was the one with the artist's hands and the mathematician's mind. He had studied architecture at the Leningrad Institute, graduating with honors. He had a bright future, designing the new face of socialism. And then, in November 1984, he had simply ceased to exist. The official story from the militia was that he had run away. Defection of the heart. The officer had sneered, implying a woman or a debt. Then, a month later, the story changed. An accident. Drowning in the Neva, body swept out to the Gulf of Finland, no remains to bury. Just a sorrowful letter from the state and a pension adjustment for their mother. Their mother had died believing Nikolai was alive in America, living a secret life. Their father had died believing Nikolai had been foolish and reckless. Alexei? Alexei hadn't known what to believe. He only knew that his brother, who had taught him how to tie a tie and how to talk to girls, who had wrapped nylon cord around his suitcase handle, so no one mistakes my bag for theirs at the station, would never leave without saying goodbye. Alexei reached out and touched the latch. It was rusted shut. He went to the utility drawer and retrieved a flathead screwdriver. With a sharp grunt of effort, he wedged the tool under the mechanism and twisted. The metal groaned, then snapped with a sharp crack. He threw the lid back. The smell of stale paper and mothballs drifted up. The suitcase was lined with a checkered fabric that had peeled away in the corners. At first glance, it contained nothing of value. A pair of woolen socks, moth-eaten and gray, a heavy glass ashtray, a book of poetry by Pushkin, the spine broken. Alexei felt a wave of nausea. Was this it? Was this the sum total of his brother's life? Just trash sold by a stranger? He picked up the book. He leafed through the pages. No inscription, no notes. He lifted the socks. Nothing. He began to feel foolish. It was just a knot. Sailors' knots were common. Thousands of people probably wrapped their handles like that. He had spent 100 rubles on a stranger's garbage because he was a desperate man chasing ghosts. He went to close the lid, but his hand brushed against the bottom lining. It felt uneven, lumpy. Alexei paused. He pressed his fingers into the checkered fabric. There was a ridge, hard and straight, running along the perimeter of the case. He pressed harder in the center. It gave slightly, but there was resistance like cardstock flexing. He grabbed the screwdriver again. He jammed it into the seam where the lining met the leather wall of the case and ripped upward. The fabric tore with a dry rasping sound. Beneath the fabric was a sheet of plywood, painted black to blend in with the frame. It was a false bottom. Alexei's heart began to hammer again. He pried the plywood up. It popped loose, revealing a shallow compartment about an inch deep. It wasn't empty. Lying in the hidden space were 3 items. First, a large manila envelope, sealed with red wax that had cracked with age. Second, a small black notebook, the kind used by field engineers. Third, a cassette tape, labeled only with a date in blue ink. 12/10/84. Alexei stared at the date. October 12, 1984. Nikolai had disappeared on November 2, 1984. This tape was recorded 3 weeks before he vanished. Alexei reached for the notebook first. His hands were shaking so badly he almost dropped it. He opened the cover. On the first page, in handwriting that Alexei knew as well as his own, sharp, angular, precise, was a single sentence. "If you are reading this, the silence has already taken me." Alexei slammed the book shut. He pushed his chair back, the legs screeching against the linoleum floor. He stood up and walked to the window, staring out at the gray courtyard below. He needed air. He needed a drink. "Nikolai," he whispered to the empty room. "What did you do?" He returned to the table. He had to know. He opened the notebook again. It wasn't a diary. It was a log. A detailed, frantic log of measurements, dates, and names. October 4th. The cement mixture is wrong. Too dense for a civilian structure. Grade 400. Why use bunker-grade concrete for a library archive? October 6th. Levchenko signed the order. He refused to look me in the eye. I asked about the ventilation shafts. He said they are for climate control of rare books. The schematics show air filtration systems designed for chemical attacks. October 8th. I followed the trucks. They didn't go to the site. They went to the perimeter zone in Gatchina, the restricted sector. Alexei flipped through the pages. It was technical, architectural, but the fear bled through the ink. Nikolai had been working on a project, officially a new expansion for the State Public Library. But the notes described something else entirely. Underground levels that weren't on the official blueprints. Walls thick enough to withstand aerial bombardment. Alexei picked up the manila envelope. He broke the wax seal and slid the contents out. They were photographs, grainy, black and white, taken in low light. They showed a construction site at night, illuminated by floodlights. In the foreground, men in military uniforms were talking to men in civilian suits. In the background, a massive pit had been dug into the earth, but it was the third photo that froze Alexei's blood. It was a picture of a document, a list of names. At the top, stamped in red, was the word liquidation, and halfway down the list was the name Volkov. And Alexei dropped the photo. It fluttered to the table, landing face up. Liquidation. In the Soviet lexicon, that didn't mean fired. It didn't mean transferred. It meant removal. It meant the end. His brother hadn't run away. He hadn't defected. He had been targeted. He had stumbled upon something he wasn't supposed to see, a secret facility being built under the guise of a library, and he had been marked for death. Alexei looked at the cassette tape. He didn't have a player in the kitchen. He had an old boombox in the living room. He grabbed the tape and walked into the other room, the silence of the apartment feeling suddenly oppressive, as if the walls themselves were listening. The boombox was a relic of the late 80s, a clunky silver plastic box that hissed when you turned it on. Alexei inserted the cassette and pressed play. For a long moment, there was only the sound of magnetic static, a rhythmic hiss, thump, hiss, thump. Then, a voice. "Is it recording?" "Yes." "Okay." It was Nikolai. Hearing the voice after 15 years was like a physical blow. It wasn't the confident, laughing voice Alexei remembered from family dinners. It was tight, breathless, pitched low as if he were hiding in a closet. "My name is Nikolai Volkov. It is late, October 12th. I don't have much time. I think they know. I think Levchenko told them I was asking questions." There was a sound of movement, fabric rustling, a nervous cough. "I am leaving this insurance. If I can get out, I will take it with me. If not, if something happens, I need someone to know. It isn't a library. God, it's not a library. It's a containment facility. Project Zaslan. They are building it right under the city, right under the noses of the people." A pause. A deep, shuddering breath. I found the supply manifests. They aren't storing books. They are storing biologicals, viral samples, from the labs in Sverdlovsk. They are moving them here to Leningrad because they think the West won't bomb a cultural center if the war starts. They are using the population of the city as human shields for their weapon stockpiles. Alexei stared at the spinning wheels of the cassette tape. Biological weapons. In 1984. It was insane. It sounded like the plot of a bad spy novel. But Nikolai was an architect, a man of logic and geometry. He didn't imagine things. I have the real blueprints. Nikolai's voice continued, more urgent now. I stole the microfiche. It's in the envelope. No. Wait. I can't put it in the envelope. Too dangerous. If they catch me with it, I'm dead instantly. I hid it. I hid it where only family would look. Alexei leaned in closer to the speaker. Alexei, the voice said. Alexei jumped. It felt like his brother was in the room. Alexei, if you find this, do not go to the police. Do not go to the militia. They are all part of it. Levchenko has friends in the KGB directorate. You have to find Elena Morozova. She helps me. She works at the archive. She knows how to read the codes. Find Elena. Tell her. The foundation is cracked. She will know what it means. The sound of a door slamming in the background on the recording. They're here, Nikolai whispered, his voice trembling with terrified certainty. They're early. I have to go. I'm going to try the fire escape. Alexei, tell Mama I didn't run away. Tell her I tried to do the right thing. I love you, little brother. Click. The tape ended. The static returned. Alexei sat in the darkening living room, the hiss of the empty tape filling the silence. Tears were streaming down his face, hot and angry. His brother hadn't just been removed. He had been hunted. Hunted in his own apartment, in the frantic minutes before he vanished. Elena Morozova, Alexei repeated, wiping his face with his sleeve. He had a name. He had a warning. And he had a suitcase that had somehow, miraculously, survived the purge of his brother's life. But who was Elena? Nikolai had never mentioned an Elena. Nikolai was private about his women. Alexei went back to the kitchen. He picked up the notebook again. He frantically flipped through the pages, looking for the name. He found it near the back. A phone number, no address, just Elena, archive, and a 7-digit number. It was a Leningrad number from 1984. It wouldn't work now. The exchanges had changed. The city had changed. But the archive. Nikolai said she worked at the archive. Alexei looked at the items on the table. The microfiche, the real blueprints, wasn't there. Nikolai said he hid it where only family would look. Alexei looked at the suitcase. He had torn out the lining. He had checked the pockets. There was nothing else. Where would I look? Alexei asked himself. Where would we look? He thought about their childhood. They had grown up in a different apartment near the Fontanka River. They used to hide messages for each other in the hollow leg of the kitchen table. They used to hide cigarettes in the hollow of the old grandfather clock. But Nikolai didn't have access to those places in 1984. He was in his own apartment. Or, Alexei looked at the book of Pushkin poetry. The Captain's Daughter. It was their father's favorite book. He used to read it to them on Sundays. Alexei picked up the book. He held it by the spine and shook it. Nothing fell out. He fanned the pages. Nothing. Then he looked at the spine itself. It was broken, the glue dried and brittle. He peered into the gap between the binding and the pages. There, wedged deep into the hollow of the spine, was a thin, dark strip of plastic, a strip of microfiche film. You clever son of a bitch, Alexei whispered, a sad smile breaking through his grief. He carefully extracted the film with a pair of tweezers from Irina's cosmetic bag. It was tiny, maybe 4 inches long. Without a reader, it was just a black strip. But this was the proof. This was the insurance. The sound of a key in the front door lock made him jump. Irina was home. Alexei quickly swept the photos, the notebook, and the microfiche back into the false bottom of the suitcase and threw the woolen socks over them. He slammed the lid shut just as Irina walked into the kitchen, carrying a plastic bag of groceries. Alexei, she said, looking at him, you look like you've seen a ghost. And why is it so dark in here? Alexei cleared his throat. I found something at the market, a project. Irina looked at the battered suitcase. She sighed, a sound of affectionate exasperation. More junk? We don't have room for more junk, Alyosha. It's not junk, Alexei said, his hand resting on the leather handle with the sailor's knot. It's family history. He couldn't tell her. Not yet. The voice on the tape had been clear. Do not go to the police. Do not trust anyone. If Nikolai was right, If there really was a biological weapons storage facility buried under the city, the people who built it, or their successors, might still be watching. The Soviet Union was gone, but the men who ran it hadn't disappeared. They had just changed their titles. They became CEOs, politicians, consultants. Levchenko. He needed to find out if Levchenko was still alive. But first, he had to find Elena. The next morning, Alexei called in sick to his job at the logistics firm. He waited until Irina left for the bakery. Then he packed the notebook and the microfiche into his jacket pocket. He left the suitcase hidden under the bed. He went to the Central State Historical Archive of St. Petersburg. It was a massive, imposing building, a labyrinth of paper where the lives of millions were catalogued and stored. He didn't have an appointment. He walked up to the reception desk, where a woman with stern glasses and a beehive hairdo sat guarding the gate. "I am looking for a former employee," Alexei said, trying to keep his voice steady. "Elena Morozova. She worked here in the early 80s. The woman looked at him over her spectacles. "We do not give out personal information of employees, past or present. It's a matter of inheritance," Alexei lied smoothly. "A will. She was named as a beneficiary. If I can't find her, the money goes to the state." Mentioning money usually greased the wheels of bureaucracy. The woman's expression softened slightly. "Morozova. Common name," she muttered. She opened a ledger on her desk. "Early 80s? "Yes. Around 1982 to 1985. She ran a finger down the column. "I have an Elena Morozova who worked in the Architectural Preservation Department. She left in 1985. Left? Resigned. Health reasons." The woman looked up. That was a difficult year for the department. A fire in the basement destroyed many records. Alexei felt a chill. "The foundation is cracked." Nikolai's code phrase. "And a fire in 1985. It couldn't be a coincidence. Do you have an address on file?" "I cannot give you that." Alexei leaned in. "Please. It's been 15 years. She might be dead for all I know. I just need to check." The woman hesitated, then wrote something on a scrap of paper and slid it across the desk. This was her last known address, from her personnel file. "If she moved, I can't help you." Alexei looked at the paper. "Ulitsa Pistelia, 14, Apt 3B. It was in the city center, near the summer garden. A good address." "Thank you," Alexei said. "Young man," the receptionist called out as he turned to leave. He stopped. "Be careful. That department, the preservation department, they didn't just preserve buildings. They handled the blueprints for the government bunkers. It was a sensitive section. The KGB had an office on that floor." Alexei nodded, his throat dry. "I understand." He took the metro to Chernyshevskaya station and walked the rest of the way. The city was gray and wet, the Neva River churning with dark water. Building 14 on Pistelia Street was a pre-revolutionary structure, its facade peeling but elegant. Alexei dialed 3B on the intercom. No answer. He waited. He tried again. Static. Then a woman's voice cracked and wary. "Yes? Elena Morozova? Who is asking?" "My name is Alexei. I am Nikolai Volkov's brother." Silence. A long, stretching silence that lasted so long Alexei thought she had walked away. Then, the buzzer buzzed. The heavy door clicked open. The apartment smelled of cats and lavender. It was cluttered, filled with books stacked in teetering towers against the walls. Elena Morozova was a small woman, perhaps in her late 50s, though she looked older. Her hair was white, pulled back in a severe bun, and her eyes were sharp, intelligent, and terrified. She didn't invite him to sit. She stood in the hallway, blocking the entrance to the living room. "You look like him," she said softly. Around the eyes. "You knew him," Alexei said. "I loved him," she corrected. The admission hung in the air, heavy and sad. "I thought he left me. I thought he went to America and forgot about me." Alexei reached into his pocket and pulled out the notebook. He held it out to her. Elena took it. Her hands trembled as she touched the cover. She opened it, saw the handwriting, and let out a small, strangled sob. She pressed the book to her chest, closing her eyes. "He didn't leave you," Alexei said gently. "He was taken. He tried to run, but they caught him." "I knew it," she whispered. "Deep down, I knew." Nikolai wouldn't just leave. But the letters. They showed me letters from him, postmarked from Vienna, saying he was happy, saying he never wanted to see me again. Forged, Alexei said. Part of the cover-up. Elena opened her eyes. They were hard now. The grief had been replaced by a cold anger. "Come in." She led him into the kitchen. She put a kettle on the stove. "Why are you here now, Alexei, after all this time?" "I found his suitcase at Udelnaya Market yesterday." Elena dropped the tea box. It clattered to the floor. "The suitcase? The brown leather one, with the knot?" "Yes. He had that with him that night," she said, her voice rushing. "He was supposed to come here. We were going to take the train to Viborg, then cross the border with the help of a smuggler I knew. I waited for him for 3 days. He never came. He left a tape," Alexei said. "He mentioned a project, a library expansion, biological weapons." Elena nodded grimly. "Project Zaslon. Yes, I worked in the archive. I was the one who flagged the discrepancy for him. I saw the geological surveys. They were digging too deep for a foundation. They were drilling into the bedrock. He said he stole the blueprints, the microfiche." "He did," Elena said. "He showed them to me. It was monstrous, Alexei. Giant vats, cooling systems, and the location. Do you know where they built it?" "No. The notes just said under the city." Elena walked to the window and pointed. "Not just under the city, under the children." Alexei frowned. "What?" "The expansion was for the public library," Elena said. "But the underground footprint, it extended west, under the Pioneer Palace, the youth center. They put a biological weapon stockpile directly beneath a place where 1,000 children played every day, because they knew the Americans would never target a school on their satellite maps." Alexei felt sick. The cynicism was absolute. It was evil in its purest bureaucratic form. "We have to expose this," Alexei said. "The tape, the photos, the microfiche. I have them." Elena looked at him with pity. "Expose it to whom? The newspapers? The police? This is Russia, Alexei. The names on those documents. Levchenko. He is now a deputy minister of construction in Moscow. The KGB officers who hunted Nikolai. They are now running private security firms. If you release this, you won't get justice. You will get an accident. So we do nothing." Alexei slammed his hand on the table. "We let them get away with murdering my brother?" "I didn't say we do nothing," Elena said. She went to a bookshelf and pulled down a thick atlas. She opened it to a map of Leningrad, dated 1984. "Levchenko is powerful," she said. "But he is also paranoid. He built his career on this project. It was his masterpiece. If the world finds out that his masterpiece is leaking, that would destroy him." "Leaking?" "The facility was shut down in 1989, Elena said. "Officially, but you cannot just turn off a biological containment unit. You have to maintain it. And Levchenko, he has been paying bribes for 10 years to keep inspectors away from the site." She looked at Alexei. "If we can prove the site is still active, and that it is dangerous, if we can get inside and get a sample, then we don't need the press. We go to the international monitors, the UN. They are in the city right now, inspecting old Soviet sites. It was a dangerous plan. It was insane. I'm a logistics manager," Alexei said. "I'm not a spy." "Nikolai was an architect," Elena said softly. "He wasn't a spy either. He was just a man who saw something wrong and couldn't look away." "Are you going to look away, Alexei?" Alexei thought of the sailor's knot on the handle. He thought of the list, liquidation. "No," he said. "I'm not." "Good," Elena said. "Then we need to go to the dacha." "The dacha?" "Nikolai had a safe house, a small shack in the woods near Rapino. He never told you? That's where he kept the key." "The key to what?" "The key to the service entrance of the facility," Elena said. "He made a copy before he stole the blueprints. If it's still there, we can walk right in." They took Alexei's car. The Lada protested the cold start, sputtering and coughing smoke, but eventually it roared to life. Elena sat in the passenger seat, the atlas on her lap. The drive to Rapino, a resort town on the Gulf of Finland, took an hour. The trees along the highway were bare. skeleton fingers scratching at the gray sky. "Tell me about him," Elena said after a long silence. "Tell me something I don't know." "He snored," Alexei said, smiling faintly, "like a bear." Elena laughed. It was a rusty sound, unused. "He did. I used to kick him." "And he was afraid of spiders." "Yes. A big architect, afraid of a tiny spider." They shared stories, small fragments of the man they had both lost. It was a strange wake, conducted at 80 kilometers an hour on a potholed highway. Alexei realized that for 15 years he had been mourning a symbol, the lost brother. But Elena had been mourning a lover, a partner. Her grief was sharper, more intimate. "Turn here," Elena said, pointing to a dirt track that disappeared into the pine forest. Alexei swung the wheel. The car bounced over roots and frozen mud. They drove for 10 minutes until the track ended at a clearing. There was a small wooden cabin, barely more than a shed. The roof had partially collapsed, and moss covered the north wall. "He bought this under a fake name," Elena said. "He wanted a place to paint. He wanted to be an artist, you know, not an architect." They got out of the car. The forest was silent, save for the wind in the pines. Elena approached the door. It was unlocked. The wood was rotten. She pushed it open. Inside, it was a time capsule. An easel stood in the corner, a canvas covered in dust. There were jars of dried paint, a rusted stove, a cot with a disintegrated mattress. "Where is the key?" Alexei asked. Elena walked to the stove. She reached inside the chimney, feeling around the brickwork. "He told me once," she said, her voice echoing in the small space. "He said, 'If I ever lose my keys, look where the fire burns brightest.'" She pulled her hand back. She was holding a small, heavy object wrapped in oilcloth. She unwrapped it. It was a brass key, long and intricate with a triangular shaft, a high-security industrial key. "It's here," she breathed. "It's actually here." But as she held it up, a sound cut through the quiet of the forest, the crunch of tires on gravel. Alexei spun around. Through the open door, he saw a black SUV pulling into the clearing, blocking his Lada. 2 men stepped out. They were wearing heavy leather jackets and jeans. They didn't look like police. They looked like trouble. "Stay inside," Alexei hissed to Elena. He stepped out onto the porch. "Can I help you?" The driver, a thick-necked man with a scar running through his eyebrow, smiled without warmth. "You're trespassing," the man said. "We're just leaving," Alexei said, trying to keep his hands from shaking. "Got lost looking for mushrooms." "Mushrooms in October?" The man laughed. "That's funny. You look like Alexei Volkov." "And the car?" "Registered to Alexei Volkov." Alexei went cold. They had been followed. Or maybe the apartment on Pastelia Street was watched. "I don't know who that is," Alexei said. "Don't play games," the second man said. He pulled a pistol from his jacket. "A Makarov." "Where is it?" "Where is what?" "The suitcase," the man said. "We know you bought it at the market." The old man, "He talks when you pay him enough. We want the suitcase, and whatever was inside it." Alexei's mind raced. The suitcase was under his bed at home. But the notebook and the microfiche were in his pocket, and the key was in Elena's hand inside the shack. "I don't have it," Alexei said. "I left it at home." "Then we will go to your home," the scar-faced man said, "after we check the shack." He took a step toward the porch. Alexei didn't think. He reacted. He grabbed a rusted shovel leaning against the wall of the cabin and swung it with all his might. The metal blade caught the scar-faced man in the shoulder. He yelled, stumbling back. The second man raised the gun. Bang! The shot echoed through the trees like a cannon blast. Alexei flinched, waiting for the pain, but the bullet hit the doorframe inches from his head, sending splinters flying. "Run!" Alexei screamed at Elena. He tackled the gunman, driving his shoulder into the man's gut. They went down into the frozen mud. The gun skittered away. Alexei scrambled up, adrenaline flooding his system. He grabbed Elena, who had appeared in the doorway, clutching the key. "The woods!" he shouted. They sprinted into the dense pines, leaving the car, the clearing, and the gunman behind. Branches whipped their faces. Behind them, they heard shouting, and then another shot, wide and wild. They ran until their lungs burned, deeper into the dark forest. clutching the key that could unlock a 15-year-old nightmare.